Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hamilton Report. I'm Scott J. Hamilton, Executive Director of the Oklahoma Democratic Party, and I'm very happy that you've decided to spend half an hour with us this evening. It's something that we really strive to keep current every single week, to look at topics that are of critical importance to Democrats in Oklahoma and progressive thinkers everywhere. And we really appreciate you being with us, and we appreciate your continued financial support as well. I want to say a very special word of thanks to my guest from last week, Jimmy Curry, president of the Oklahoma AFL-CIO. He was a great guest and proud partner in the labor movement. Also want to say to Tamaya Cox, who will be with us on next week's Hamilton Report, talking about women's health and reproductive rights. She was scheduled for this evening's broadcast, but instead we made a change late in the process so that we could bring you something that is truly more urgent, frankly, because it involves a vote of the the Tulsa, Oklahoma City Council this week that could have some powerful benefits for LGBTQ plus folks in Tulsa. And yet some people are not convinced that that's the right thing to be doing. And so it's with a great deal of pleasure that I'm happy to welcome to our program this evening the Chief Executive Officer and the Executive Director of Oklahomans for Equality and the Dennis R. Neal Equality Center in Tulsa. Toby Jenkins, welcome to the Hamilton Report.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you for having me, and hello, Democrats.
Well, I am very, very happy that you are with us this evening, because this is a big issue, and I want you to go into a little detail, if you would, about what your work has been over. It's got to be nearly a decade now in gaining inclusion for LGBTQ plus people in Tulsa's hate crimes ordinances. Would you give us a little of the background, please?
So for several years now, at least for 15 years that I've been actively involved, we've been trying to advance hate crime legislation in Oklahoma, because Oklahoma does not have any protections for LGBTQ people when it comes to reporting hate crimes. No prosecution, no enhanced penalties. So this has been something that we've introduced repeatedly. In 2018, we had at least 3 different lawmakers who tried to introduce it at the state capitol, and of course, it was never allowed to make it out of committee. Well, here in Tulsa, we have some very supportive city council persons who we've worked closely with, and this was beginning to really trouble them. And so they decided that they were going to do something about it within Tulsa. Now, the Dennis R. Neal Equality Center, Oklahomans for Equality, is based in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We're actually an original offshoot of a group out of Oklahoma City. So while we're in Tulsa, we don't necessarily feel like we're restricted to serving the state just in the city of Tulsa, because we have chapters spread out across the state and continue to have more of those developed.
And Toby, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I certainly don't think of OKEQ as being a Tulsa-specific organization. The work that you folks have done for many, many years, particularly to advance legislation toward equality in the state legislature, has been nothing short of an all-out effort. So my congratulations to all of the work that you've done, both in Tulsa, but for LGBTQ Oklahomans throughout our state. I want you to say right now what it is you hope will happen in this Wednesday's vote.
I hope that the City Council of Tulsa and the mayor's office will approve an ordinance amendment. That amendment would add to our present hate crime statute in the city of Tulsa. We already have a hate crimes ordinance. It would add to that ordinance 3 protected classes: sex, sexual orientation, gender identity. Presently, our city's hate crime statute already includes race, religion, national ethnicity, disability. So this would add 3 additional protected classes. They will vote on this Wednesday. It's already had its first hearing. This will be its second public hearing, and they'll have a vote for this on Wednesday at their 5 p.m. scheduled meeting. And then, of course, we'll have the waiting game, waiting for the mayor of Tulsa if he himself will approve it. We work very closely with this city council and with this mayor's office. We're almost a broken record, telling them that something needed to be done. Of course, you know, we have a visible reminder constantly in downtown Tulsa because the Dennis Arnell Equality Center, the 7th largest LGBT center in the nation, sits right on Pride Street in downtown Tulsa. And in the last 3 years has been vandalized 3 times. 3 years ago, we had somebody shoot up the front building, 14 bullet holes. Just last July, we had the Lynn Riggs mural. Lynn Riggs was a celebrated poet from Oklahoma who's responsible for the Broadway musical Oklahoma. He's the backstory on that and was openly gay, and people knew that in the 1940s. And so we have a mural that shows honor and tribute, and our theater is named after him. That was vandalized last July. In the last year, our organization has had to spend almost $40,000 to protect our assets. We had to spend $30,000 just on the windows to make sure they were bullet resistant. We had to spend almost $5,000 restoring the mural and making sure that we put a protective coating on it in the event that it was vandalized. You could easily remove the vandalism, the graffiti, without defacing the work of the artist.
Toby, this is, I'm shocked to know that you've had to spend that much money.
And we're a nonprofit, and I don't get a penny from the state of Oklahoma.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're having to spend that money just to protect the people who utilize the Dennis Arnell Equality Center and protect the staff. That's astounding. You said just in the last couple of years. We're going to look at some statistics in a moment, but first, I'd like for you to go back 3.5 years ago to when this administration took over the White House. Did you notice any upticks in LGBTQ victims of violence or attacks after that inauguration?
I always like to put this on the record, Scott, because, you know, I'm born and bred and baptized in Oklahoma, and I've lived here my entire life, and I've lived all over the world, but I always like to remind folks, our hate crimes are not any higher than any other state. In fact, all across the nation, we see hate crimes where they statistically report them, investigate them, and prosecute them. The difference is we just don't prosecute ones that are directed at LGBTQ persons. So we noticed, we've been tracking them for several years, but we noticed when we took a new direction in the leadership of this country and the White House had a new occupant, almost immediately we began to see this super rise in complaints coming into the Equality Center. We are accustomed to every single week, anywhere from 8 to 23 people. That's our average of folks who file complaints with our office. Maybe it's housing discrimination, employment discrimination, needing access to services, and they've been denied service in a doctor's office or a mental health professional, or they've been bullied in their high schools. And so we get those reports. Also, we get those reports of hate crimes and acts of vandalism. We began to notice the minute this administration was declared the winner, from that November, we saw an uptick. Our bullying statistics exploded by 800%.
So let's just look at these numbers for a moment. In the last this is just the last 2 years of statistics that you folks keep. And I'm very grateful that you do record all of the complaints that are presented to your organization, because they're hard to find elsewhere in the state. In the last 2 years, you have reported 4 murders, 139 incidents of violence, vandalism 141 times, sexual assault 38 times, harassment 740 times, school bullying 1,222 times, and elder abuse 13 times. That's in 2 years in Tulsa that you received?
Now, Scott, these statistics are from all over the state.
Right, but I'm saying that you get them in Tulsa.
Right, because they contact us here.
And these are the ones that are presented to you that don't even touch those that have been presented to law enforcement, for example, and nothing was ever done with it. It was just to wither on the vine. But going back to that school bullying for a moment, in 2 years, to know that 1,222 young Oklahomans were bullied because of their actual or perceived sexual orientation or gender identity. That's horrendous. And yet what's being done about that, Toby?
Well, not enough. I mean, we do have school districts under the Obama administration. You would lose your federal funding if you didn't have protections for LGBTQ students. And of course, our state superintendents knew that. And so they wanted to hang on to those federal dollars. So you began to see school districts all across the state. In 2015, under the Obama administration's demands that you make sure that your LGBTQ students are protected and their civil rights are respected, we had 481 cases of reported bullying. In 2016, we had that almost double and went to almost 668. 2017, it tripled. In 2018, it went down just a little bit, but it still was 3 times what it had been in 2015 under the Obama administration. So the message is clear. When the president bullies people from his podium, that it's safe for you to bully people who are different from you in your high schools. And it's a pervasive poison that has spread into our country, where the national leaders are not setting the examples of a civil society.
That's a sadly accurate statement. I agree with you. For our viewers, we've just presented a lot of numbers to you, but I want to understand the fact that these are not statistics. These are individual Oklahomans who have been discriminated against, who have been harmed, who have been violated sexually, and the list goes on. So these are more than statistics. These are our neighbors, our friends, our brothers, our sisters. It's us. And it's just incredible to know that so little is being done. And so here you are, Toby, in a situation where you have been promoting a greater inclusivity in Tulsa's hate crimes legislation. And now I'm understanding that there is a group within the community who are actually opposed to this. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, there is some discussion and some disagreement over where this, what direction we ought to go on this. And I'm a Democrat. I'm dressed in blue today, and that's what I wear on Monday to remind myself I'm a Democrat. But I too am in favor of police reform and criminal justice reform and reduction of incarceration. But where we see some confusion is we must continue to address violent crime and take it serious, especially when you try to terrorize a community. And so there seems to be, as we're all grappling and theorizing on how we can improve, how we can reform criminal justice, we can reduce incarceration, we can change the way that we police folks, which I support 100%. Fallen under this umbrella, individuals have begun to suggest it under this umbrella that hate crime legislation should be removed, that the enhanced penalties are contributing to higher rates of incarceration and the stigmatization of people of color, people living in poverty. Yet we know statistically that about 62% of acts of hate crimes are committed by white young men under 27 years old. So we disagree with that assessment, and I do not believe that violent crime, we should ever believe that violent crime can be addressed and taken care of with us just sitting around theorizing about it. We know that there has to be laws in place that punish violent actions, and so there's a strong disagreement over it, and I am trying to listen and learn, but I would not say it's just necessarily the age gap within the LGBTQ movement, because I have a whole staff of young people who work for me, and they certainly don't see it this way, because every day, I mean, we're the organization. I have to go in and clean up the blood after you've been assaulted. I'm the one that has to help you find a safe place to live, because you're going to have to move out of your neighborhood or move out of your apartment. I'm the one that has to help you file the police report, find medical attention, find the counseling services after you've been traumatized. We're the ones that have to help you rebuild their lives. And so our staff see every day the results of violence and vandalism and harassment and discrimination, and how the victims don't have pathways of justice. That it breaks our hearts to have to tell them what has happened to you is not a hate crime in Oklahoma, and they will just be shocked when we have to tell them that.
We had a situation in Oklahoma County earlier this summer, and Alicia Andrews, our chair, held a press conference about this. There was a young man, a realtor in Edmond, who was beaten just within an inch of his life, bloodied, broken. This man was pulverized by a straight couple, and they were issued a misdemeanor citation and sent home. The DA said, no, that doesn't count as a hate crime. And yet the whole time that they were beating on this man, they were shouting slurs, homophobic slurs. And so we know the need that exists here. I need to point out that I am very much in favor of criminal justice reform. We did a show on that just a couple of weeks ago when our guest broke it down for us and showed us the damage that it does to our community. And so I believe very much in the need to reform our criminal justice process. It doesn't compute for me, though, how you can argue that by just not pointing this out, how we're not taking it seriously, how that in any way benefits anyone. Because as you said, most hate crimes are committed by young white men, not marginalized folks in terms of race or ethnicity or culture. And yet, according to some of the detractors of this measure, they're saying, well, no, it would just take more people of color and incarcerate them. I don't quite understand that logic. Can you help me with that?
Well, the logical thing for me is if I'm pink, if that's my race is pink, if I commit a criminal act against somebody, a violent act, because I don't like the way they worship, I don't like people who have physical challenges, or I don't like the gender of that person, or I don't like who they love, and I attack them, I feel like you should be punished for that act of violence against a person. Last year, we had an incident where we had a gay man who murdered his neighbor and constantly harassed the man and his family because of their ethnicity and where they were from racially and their particular religious beliefs. And he eventually killed that man. He was a gay man, and we supported and stood with that family and demanded justice for him and asked that be investigated and prosecuted as a hate crime. And it was prosecuted as a hate crime. And that gay man went to prison, and he died in prison. Now, we believe that anybody, for whatever reason, if they decide that some hate in their heart directed at somebody because of their race, their religion, their disability, their national origin, their sexual orientation, their gender identity and expression, we believe that you should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law if it's a hate-based motivated action.
And we've seen there have been many studies done over the last decade in cities, communities, and states where hate crime legislation includes LGBTQIA2 people. And in in the vast majority of those states, we find that there is a decrease in that kind of crime once the legislation goes into effect. And so it seems to me that it is a deterrent, it's a preventative, and it's a measure that I'm still not quite sure how it could be a losing proposition. So
well, I think it would be the wrong message for Oklahoma to keep things as they are, because I feel like it's time that there be a pathway for justice for individuals who are victims. I mean, the first murder committed in Oklahoma on January 1st, 2020 was against a transgender man who was murdered in McAlester, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I mean, right now we have Aubrey Damon, who is an indigenous transgender woman, has been missing for a whole year. And we have the police records where the law enforcement, when they were investigating her case, they kept throwing slurs and suggesting because of her lifestyle choices, she probably had brought something upon herself. Like they thought that justified her being murdered and they're not being able to find her body. So her family for a whole year have been looking for her body. They've had to lead the investigation because law enforcement, if law enforcement in Oklahoma is not held accountable to take these things serious, there's too many places in our rural districts where they will not take it serious and they'll use their own internal bias directed against LGBT persons. They'll use their own bias to hold up those investigations. We've seen it happen countless times, Scott, and you and I have worked with people who've lived in rural districts where they could not get any support from the prosecutor or the chief law enforcement officer. And we've had to call in the FBI to go in and insert themselves in that to make sure that those persons, that their cases were being investigated.
And that's all the more reason I believe that this kind of legislation is important. We're hearing a great deal right now about the economy. Some people say it's strong. Most people would agree that it is not strong at all. So many Oklahomans are still unemployed as a result of the pandemic. And if we are going to grow as a state, if Tulsa is going to grow as a city, if our more rural areas are going to add businesses, don't you think it would send a much better message to potential employers moving into the state that says, we really do value your employees that are coming with you, and we'll make sure that they're happy and healthy and protected?
Right now, if you were to be living in the other 49 states and you were an LGBTQ plus person and your company was about to transfer you to Oklahoma, or you were about to move here for some kind of investment opportunity, there's a little thing called Zillow that you can pull up to help you find property. Zillow has an app where you can put in the details and you can put in that you're an LGBTQ person and you're looking for a safe area to live. Did you know that Zillow gives Oklahoma a 0 for protections for LGBTQ persons? They give us a 0. There's no hate crimes protections, no employment protections, no housing protections, and our bullying processes in our high schools are very inefficient. And that's how Zillow, when you're looking to, can you imagine people whose companies are transferring them here for whatever reason, when they put in there that they're looking to, and we have people call us here at the center all the time who are getting ready to move to Oklahoma, and they want to know where are safe portions of the city for LGBT people. Where's the LGBT friendly section of the city?
Toby, we began this discussion by talking about what's happening this week in Tulsa. Once the vote is taken, how long before you think we'll have a resolution one way or another whether this will be enacted?
Well, we have to wait on the mayor's signature, and we don't have a clear definition of a clear answer of where the mayor's office. Now, Scott, we've been asking for this for at least 10 years. I've been on the Human Rights Commission for 14 years, and we've been asking for these kind of protections at the local level. And every time the building is vandalized, we make sure to make it an effort, and we have a march, and we march to City Hall and demand for the city of Tulsa to have an ordinance, and I still don't have an ordinance. So I don't know for sure that I have the votes, and I don't know for sure where this mayor will stand on this particular ordinance that has been introduced by the city council.
Well, you also said at the beginning, and I applaud you for this, you said that you're listening and you're trying to understand those folks within the community who are standing in opposition to this measure. And I applaud you for that, because you have worked long and hard to make this a reality. I hope that if it passes successfully, that there will be a calming between both sides, so that we can begin to understand how it is we can best work together. As you know, in politics and nonprofit, in any movement, it's easy for factions to divide when we honestly can't afford any division right now.
Right.
So I'll tell you, you've done great work, and I appreciate it. I know that everyone in Tulsa does, and certainly people around the state, because as you mentioned, so many communities are just left defenseless, and that's a real shame. We'll be keeping an eye on what happens in Tulsa this week, and we'll certainly report back to viewers of the Hamilton Report next Monday evening. But Toby, I wish you the best, and I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us this evening and giving us your perspective, and hopefully shedding some light on this critical issue for Tulsa and for Oklahoma. So thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you so much.
Well, this is an issue that impacts a number of people, and that's what this program is all about: to explore issues, to take a deeper look into what's happening in our cities and our towns throughout the state of Oklahoma. We will continue to do this, and in order to do this, we really need your continued support. Whether you support the Oklahoma Democratic Party with a gift of $25 a month or $50, whatever amount feels comfortable for you, I assure you that every dollar you offer to the party is money spent on getting change made in a positive fashion by getting Democrats elected in Oklahoma and for Oklahoma in Washington. And finally, this is a very personal appeal. This is my birthday week. And as any of you have had birthdays since March, you know it's a very different atmosphere, no parties to speak of, and mine will be no different. But this is a personal appeal from me to you. On my 60th birthday this week, I would encourage you to give a gift that includes a six, whether that's $6 or $16 or $60 or $600. Not to me, but to the Oklahoma Democratic Party. You can do that by visiting okdemocrats.org/donate. As I said at the beginning of this podcast, our guest next week will be Tamaya Cox-Torre from Planned Parenthood of the Great Plains, an amazing advocate for women and reproductive rights, a staunch ally of all that's good in the state of Oklahoma, and a great warrior for those things that need to be changed. I hope that you will make every effort to join me next Monday evening right here at 7 o'clock. And as always, I'll just remind you that that if you've missed any of our past shows, you can always catch them at okdemocrats.org/YouTube. And please, by all means, feel free to share this with your friends. So on behalf of all of us at the Oklahoma Report and the Oklahoma Democratic Party, the Hamilton Report and the Oklahoma Democratic Party, I thank you for spending time with us this evening, and I'll look forward to seeing you again right here next Monday evening. Until then, take good care of yourself. Have a good evening, and we'll see you next week.